Torah tells us in Parshas Vayishlach that as Yaakov was traveling to go back to Eretz Yisrael to reconcile with his parents after many years of being away in Lavan's house, so we know that a lot of things happened to Yaakov along the way. You know about the wrestling match that he has with the angel. So after that's over, and he's about to meet up with Yoseph, it says, Vayakom balaylahu, that he arose on that night, Vayikach eshtei nashav eshtei shivchasa besachadasar yiladav, that he takes his 2 wives and his 2 handmaidens and his 11 children, Vayavor es ma'avar yabok, and he passes the Yabok crossing. And then later on he has this encounter with the angel. So the Rashi asks the question, Vesachadasar Yiladav, his 11 sons. So Rashi asks the question, V'dina heichan hayta, where was Dina? He didn't just have 11 sons, he had a daughter too. Where was she? Nisana b'teva, he placed her in a box. V'na'al b'faneha, and he locked it up. Shelo yitin ba Esav einav. We talk about protective fathers, right? He didn't want Esav to see Dinah. He didn't want Esav to even see her. Ulachach ne'enash Yaakov. And as a result, Yaakov was punished she'manea me achiv, because he held Dinah back from his own brother. Shema tachsirenu lumutav. Perhaps if he would not have been so protective of Dinah, and perhaps if he would have allowed Esav to meet Dinah, she might have been able to rehabilitate him. She might have been able to have a positive effect upon him. She would have been makarev him. He would have been a great kiruv project, right, Esav. And therefore, v'nafla b'yad Shechem. As a result, the tragedy happens, and Dinah falls into the clutches of Shechem. Now, you might ask a number of questions here. Is it fair for Dinah to fall into the clutches of Shechem because of a mistake that her father makes? Well, let's hold that in your head for just a second, because that doesn't seem fair, that she should get punished because her father kept her in a box. Let's take a look at the Siftei Chachamim. The Siftei Chachamim says, and I apologize for the poor font, I just didn't have it in my Bar Ilan CD, so I had to get it from another source. So the Siftei Chachamim asks the question, he says, V'kasha, I don't understand, D'maishna mileya. Why is Dinah any different from Leah? Shahayu ma'asei Esav sinuin. That for Leah, her view of Esav was that he was a terrible person, and she dreaded the prospect of having anything to do with Esav. You know that famous midrash which says that on the pasuk that we read last week's parsha, ve'enei Leah rakos, that the eyes of Leah were dim or soft. Different ways to explain that. So Rashi says, quotes a medrash over there and says that she cried herself to sleep every night, that her eyes were all puffy from tears, because everyone used to say that Lavan has 2 daughters and Yitzchak has 2 sons, and Yitzchak's 2 sons will marry the 2 daughters of Lavan. And Leah says, I'm the older of the 2 daughters, and Esav is the older of the 2 sons. The prospect of marrying Esav was just so horrible to her, so she davened and davened and davened, and we learn from there that the koach of tefillah, isn't it amazing, the power of prayer? The power of prayer is so great that even though it was predestined that Yaakov was supposed to marry Rachel, it was through Leah's tears and through Leah's prayers that not only was she able to marry Yaakov, but she married Yaakov even before Rachel, who was the predestined one, was able to marry him. Okay? So, that's the Siftei Chachamim's question. So, why is Dinah and why is Yaakov being incriminated for putting Dinah in a box if Leah had the very same attitude? V'hakasuv mazkira l'shevach v'lo ne'nash. We don't find Leah ever getting punished for crying herself to sleep and davening to Hashem, don't let me marry Esav. Afal pisha ha'isa machzirasa l'mutav. She could have also done it. Esav would have been a good kiruv project for Leah. So therefore, v'lama ne'nash Yaakov. So why is Yaakov being punished when Leah is not being punished? Leah is lauded for her righteousness, for not wanting to marry Esav. And here Yaakov is being it's a valid, no, it's a legitimate question, right? Legitimate question. Let's see what Yosef Secham gives two answers. Answer number one, he says, V'yesh lomar d'shayni Leah. Leah is different. Why? Lefi ba'oso zman hayarasha gamur. Because in Leah's time, when Esav was a young guy, he was a Casanova. He was playing around. And therefore, delokach nashim al nasha ve'asa averos chamuros. He was a crazy guy in his youth. He was wild, just totally wild. And so as a young man, there was no hope of Leah being able to have any positive effect whatsoever on Esav when he was crazy and sowing his wild oats. V'yefshel lahachzir lemutav, lefichach mazkira l'shevach. And therefore, Leah is remembered for a blessing in a praiseworthy fashion, because since she saw that this guy is absolutely wild, and there's no way for me to have any effect on him, so she cried herself and davened to Hashem, please don't let me have anything to do with this man. Aval achshav shenichmeru rachamav al Yaakov v'neshako b'chol libo. But now we meet a new Esav in Parshas Vayishlach. We meet a mature Esav, an Esav who's already gotten all his craziness out of his system. Maybe he's 29, 30 years old by now. Obviously, we know he's much older than that, but I'm just saying, comparing to the world of today, when you're in your 20s, you're crazy, you're wild, and then when you calm down already, when you're around 30, you start to become mature, become responsible, right? So So now Esav's an older man, he's more mature. You see that he's acting in a refined fashion, in a conciliatory fashion with his brother Yaakov. Maybe there was something to work with over here. And Yaakov should have realized that, and he should have thought, maybe we can be Makari Esav now. That in itself is a valuable lesson. Sometimes you see people that are crazy and wild, and you say, was there any hope for them? The answer is, of course, but it may not be this year. We may have to wait until they get the craziness out of their system, and then maybe they'll come back. I say just the contrary. The people who have the most wildness and the most craziness are the best candidates for kiruv, because they show that they've got tremendous energy. And whatever energy people have for doing crazy things, that energy can easily be converted by the rules of conservation of energy. You can always convert negative energy into positive energy. People who are dull are the hardest people to work with, right? People who are wild and crazy are the ones that you want to work with the most, because they have the potential for greatness. Esav had potential for greatness, right? So that's why. Yes?
And if you can go even deeper, you can say that Yaakov was primed to believe like this about his brother. So really, you can look at it and say, you can ask the question, why was he even blamed for this? This is the way he was even made.
He was conditioned to that.
His brother, right?
Okay.
And why was it Dina's responsibility? Why was she held accountable for her responsibility?
Right. So the question about Dina being held responsible is about, I'm going to get to that in a moment. But Yaakov, you could say that Yaakov was always taught that there was no hope for Esav, or that was the way he was brought up, and that's the way he probably viewed his brother. But again, we can still criticize Yaakov for living in the past. View your brother for who he is today. Don't superimpose your memories of that bad guy that you remember from your youth. Look at him who he is today. Maybe you should see the person that's in front of you. Sometimes we remember our siblings from the past and we can't get past it, right? But it's time to move on, right? So then the Sifsei Chachamim gives a second answer. This is the second answer. He says, Od yesh lomar. He says, let's give a second answer. He says, D'shem Leah lo haisa misugeles lahachziro lemutav. Maybe Leah just didn't have the right personality to be Makare Esav. It could have been the same Esav. But you're dealing with two different ladies here. Maybe Leah realized in herself that she just didn't have the character, she didn't have the right personality to be Makarev and Esav. Aval Dina, shenisa'a le'io vehechzir lemuta v'giarte im kain af le'esav haisa machzirasa lemuta. There's a medrash that says that Dina eventually married Job, and she was able to get Job to do tshuva and to be Magayer, to become Jewish. So you see that Dina had this power to be Makarev people. She had the right personality. She was a Kiruv personality. And Yaakov should have recognized that in Dina. And that's why it was considered criminal for Yaakov, where it wasn't for Leah. Because you're dealing with Dina and Leah are two different people. So we have two answers from the Sifsei Chachamim. One answer is because the reason why Leah is righteous and Yaakov is condemned is because Leah was dealing with an Esav who was wild and crazy in his youth, and Yaakov was dealing with an Esav who showed that he was subject to rehabilitation, he was more mature. The second answer of the Sifsei Chachamim is that Leah knew herself that she just didn't have it within her to work with guys who were wild and crazy, but Dina had that potential, she had the ability. And Yaakov should have recognized that in her, and that's why he's criticized, and that's why he's condemned. Go ahead.
So how has Yaakov seen Esav as mature? He's coming at him with an army.
Yes, but they embrace, they kiss, Esav says, "What's trouble?"
Before then?
He did, but he could have anticipated. He should have, once he met Esav, he should have said, "Okay, Dina, get out of the box. Come meet your uncle." Right? You know? You can come out and the coast is clear. Right. All right. There's another answer that Rav Blach, who was one of the Rosh Yeshiva and Telz, offers in his Sefer Shiurei Das, which we won't have time to go into. I just copied the whole shtickle for it. It's a much part of a much longer essay. But I just want to read that first paragraph of this idea. He says, right after the first line, he says, Lo eda im nitva adam al zeh. He says, I can't tell you for sure whether a person can actually be punished for this. Avol b'mitzius od eina al pi ha'emes. But one thing I can tell you is that if you act in the following way, you're not being true to Hashem. Ki al pi ha'emes tzarech ha'adam lios muchdar rak b'matara shel malchus shamayim v'lo yoser. Because a person should be exclusively concerned about one thing and one thing alone, about crowning and coronating God and exalting God in this world. V'yihiyeh al yedei mi sheyihiyeh. And it doesn't matter who's going to be the hero of the story. I don't have to be the person who's the guy in the front and my name is in lights on the top of the list of the honorees. As long as God's name is glorified, that's all that matters. Al yado al yedei acher. It doesn't matter whether it's through me or through somebody else. God's glory be made in this world, and what happens to me is of no consequence. My nafgalei mina. What difference does that make? Rak malchus shamayim tiyah. U'she'ifa kazu tzrich lahakifes mahus adam. This kind of yearning has to envelop a person completely. Rucho v'nishmaso, his whole spirit, his whole soul. V'lo yimsa shum makom la'ani nifrad. There's no room for this ani. It's all, what's in it for me? What's going to happen to me? That's not the imperative. That's not the focus. Ani is not what it's all about. It's about Hashem. Sheyidro shayid sha'al yado yiyazos. Elakol mahus ha'adam tzrich lios rak malchus shamayim v'lo yoter. A person's whole objective has to be God's greatness is elevated, God's kingship is elevated in this world. That's it. And if there's any room in this world where a person still says, yeah, there's something important, I need to be part of this, that he says, no, I want to be the one who does the mitzvah. No, I don't want you to do the mitzvah. I want to be the one who gets the zuchus, right? If that's your attitude, Lu yihi she'olam haba hu doresh, even though you're doing it because you want to get olam haba, nevertheless, kedushas Hashem hu doresh ein ze kol ha'emes la'amito, but that's not emes. You're not seeking truth. even though what you're doing is l'shem shamayim. You're saying, I want this chus, I want the olam haba, I want to do the mitzvah. Better that I should do it than you should. No. Better that it doesn't matter who does the mitzvah, but that the way that Hashem is glorified is the greatest. That's the objective. So how does that have to do with Yaakov? Yaakov Avinu was looking for a way to have prestige in his mishpacha. We all want the best shidduch for our sons and our daughters. We want the most prestigious family. We want the best boy in Lakewood or YU or whatever yeshiva in between those two may be. We want the best girl from the best mishpacha, from the best family. Why? Because we want our children to marry so that they can have the chashivas and they can have the yichus and they can... But what does that have to do with God's glory? What does it have to do with sanctifying Hashem in the world? That's got nothing to do with Hashem. That's got to do with you. That's about me. That's not about Hashem. That's about me. It's about my family. It's about my children. But where's the Hashem in that equation? And the answer is that that's the criticism of Yaakov Avinu, is that he was thinking more in some anochiyut way, in some kind of ego way, that I want my daughter to have the best guy in Lakewood. And therefore Esav is not an option. And in reality, what he should have been thinking of is there a way for me to glorify Hashem? And let Hashem's will be done and Hashem's coronation be done through my family. And if that means that my daughter will marry an Esav, then that's the way it should happen. Yeah.
Look at it totally the opposite way. Like, if Hashem needs for Esav to come back, to do tshuva, it'll happen anyway. It doesn't have to be me who's the one who sends my daughter.
Yeah, but the fact that I'm meeting him up now and he's going to meet my family, maybe there's a destiny there.
Maybe not. You don't know what.
Yeah, and therefore, don't protect your daughter so that she can marry the best boy in Lakewood. Allow the possibility for Hashem's greatness to be exposed in the world. Anyway, that's Reb Bloch, the Telzer Rosh Yeshiva. And I'm going to give you one last perspective. This is my own commentary. I think that this is what we'll finish with. Let's go back to the question of the Sifsei Chachamim. The question of the Sifsei Chachamim is, what's the difference between Leah and Dinah? Why is Leah praised and lauded? And why is Yaakov criticized for locking Dinah in a box? I think there's a very balabatish, very straight, direct, simple answer. Because there's a difference between prayer and locking someone in a box. It just boils down to that. The difference is that it's one thing to daven to Hashem, that your children should be secure and should be safe and should be protected, and make sure that you do take the proper precautions to protect them from any ill effects of the outside world. But don't lock them in a box. Because when you lock your children in a box, you're going to end up having the exact opposite effect of what you wanted. You are over protecting your children. You're smothering your children. You're so protective of making sure that they never meet Esav, so guess what's going to happen? Something worse will happen to them. And it would seem to me that that's why, shortly after this story, we read in this pasuk in the beginning of Perek Lamed Daled, "Vateitzei Dinah bas Leah asher yolda liYaakov liros b'vinos haaretz." That Dinah, the daughter of Leah, which she gave birth to from Yaakov, why did she go out? Why did she go out to see the daughters of the land? Why did Dinah? What impelled her to want to go out and see what was going on the other side of the fence? Because she was in a box. That's exactly the answer. If Yaakov had not locked Dinah in a box when they were traveling, she wouldn't have had this cabin fever and wanted to get out and see what was going on in the outside world. You see, if Yaakov Avinu would have davened like Leah, he would have davened to Hashem and he would have cried his eyes out and said, Hashem, as worried as I am about myself and about our own physical safety, I'm also worried that Esav should please don't let Esav fall in love with my daughter Dinah. She's a pretty girl, and I don't want Dinah to in some way get involved with my brother. If he would have davened, and he would have taken protective measures, would have had a talk with Dinah. There are nice boys and there are not such nice boys, and there are boys that you want to meet and there are boys that you just want to say good Shabbos to in shul in the lobby and then move on, right? So then that would have been one thing, right? But that's not what Yaakov did. And as a result, his overprotection of Dinah resulted in the exact opposite effect. And that's why Yaakov is being taken to task. Because he could have had a positive effect both on the outside world and on his daughter had he acted moderately. Had he acted with a little bit of moderation instead of going to the extreme. That, I think, is an important lesson for us to be able to take out of this story, and about the connectivity between the episodes with Dinah, with Esav, and with the story of Dinah that comes right after it. We have to know how to moderately protect our children, how to create semi-permeable filters so that we're not locking our children in a box to make the rest of the outside world mayim genuvim. As it says in Mishlei, mayim genuvim yimtaku. Stolen waters are much sweeter. So if we create stolen waters for our children by locking them in a box, then we end up doing a disservice not only to ourselves, but to our children as well. Yeah?
And can't you also say, Rabbi Korobkin, it's very, very interesting, because if you look at Leah, right, Leah turned to Hashem. She cried. She had, even though she didn't have the emunah you could say, to know that Hashem was going to do the right thing, she still turned to the Kadosh Baruch Hu through tefillah.
Yes.
Where Yaakov, interestingly enough, as you said, could have turned to the Rabban Shalom and through tefillah.
Yes.
But he did something physical.
Yes.
It's almost like he had a lack of emunah. It's like almost like he went, everything we talked about,
yes,
almost to that level of where
yeah,
he took it and he went
beautiful,
another way.
Yeah, no, very, very nice. But of course, you can also say that's the difference between men and women, right? Right. A woman serves Hashem through her dibur. She davens, she pours out her heart, and the man says, "I got to do something. If I'm not doing something."
But he didn't do something physically.
Yeah.
Turning to the Rabban Shalom.
Yeah. Well, maybe it could be for Yaakov. That was his way of turning to Hashem too. Like we talked last week. He took the maklos. He took the speckled rods. That was his way of, and remember we said last week, I'll do a little bit and Hashem will take over. So maybe, but maybe you're right. Maybe Yaakov, it could be we're not saying so much different, but I think what you're saying is excellent. Leah turned to HaKadosh Baruch Hu directly. Yaakov felt, I got to do something. Yeah. Okay, it's all good. All right. Yes.
What about Dinah?
Dinah. Yes. So what about Dinah? Poor Dinah. So it's not, Dinah's not being punished. Dinah didn't do anything wrong. But sometimes we mess up our kids. Sometimes we kill our kids. That's what happens. Don't you? That's the whole lesson of the story. If you lock your child in a box and then they go out to the street one day and they meet the wrong people, you can't blame you. It's not a punishment to your child because now they go crazy. Who's responsible for that? We have to bear the responsibility for not raising our children properly, for smothering them, for not preparing them adequately for the outside world. We have to take the blame. Dinah's not being punished for this. No, she didn't do anything. You're right, she didn't do anything. And a lot of times we suffer by seeing our children, fall into crazy things because of the way that we brought them up. Now, I'm not laying a guilt trip. A lot of times we did everything right, and our kids still end up messed up, right? But we have to again realize that I don't think the lesson of the story is that Dinah did anything wrong. Dinah didn't do anything wrong. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Dinah actually had kibbutz al-Beit.
Yeah, she did. Okay. On that note, have a great day.